we're going to start with chances created. You think of a playmaker, you think of them creating chances. Trent Alexander-Arnold, based on that bracket of time, is number 1 in Europe. 289 chances created. He's third on the per 90 minutes list, averaging 2.37. João Cancelo, not as high as Trent, but for a fullback is absolutely massive. 125, creating 1.43 every 90 minutes. This is madness that we're talking about 2 fullbacks.
Yeah, I mean, they're both different kinds of fullbacks. But they are both playmakers, and they sort of exemplify their system, their team system of play, and they're both the children of Dani Alves, right? Let's go back to where it all began with the playmaker fullback is Dani Alves, right? I was once having a conversation with Jonathan Wilson on Twitter, arguing with him about Maicon versus Dani Alves 10 years ago, and I was like, Dani Alves is better than Maicon, and he was like, oh, Maicon does this. I was like, if Maicon's a great right back, what would you call Dani Alves then? And he said sui generis, which is Latin, which means the first of his kind. And he's right. Dani Alves was he was for Sevilla. If you watched him, Sid Lowe's written so many great things about him. The one-man band, Sonic the Hedgehog. He was their right back, but he was also their midfield playmaker. He would come in field and just be their playmaker from right back because Jesus Navas was bombing on down the flank, and Sevilla were great. Then he went to Barcelona and he basically started doing the same thing, but going wide as Lionel Messi came in field. And the fact that he's still playing, by the way, at the age of 38, he was the most incredible, ridiculous player as a fullback, and he was so unique and different to anything else that had come before him, really. He didn't play it like the usual fullbacks, which we'll get to later. It's not to denigrate those guys. They're brilliant too, but Alves was such a unique player and such a unique force, and his starring role for Barcelona really sort of thrust the idea of this kind of fullback into the mainstream, right? And not everyone that's tried to do it has been good. Before we get to Trent and Cancelo, who are great, Sergio Roberto was a great example of Barca tried to make Fetch happen, right? They tried to make Sergio Roberto happen again and again, and he didn't have the same thing Alves had. Trent Alexander-Arnold has that same thing Dani Alves had. He's a phenomenal creative force. João Cancelo is a different kind of player. He was a freight train right back. He was a freight train right back at Juventus, at Valencia, wherever. City have turned him into a sort of playmaker. He doesn't have those numbers that Trent does, like you said, because he plays a sort of almost withdrawn role, just a link. Like he plays basically central midfield for City. Like it's not a key role. He's not making the key passes necessarily the same way that Trent does, but he's netting the attack together. He's playing so well there that the likes of De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva can just go forward and play attacking midfield because he's playing central midfield. Phenomenal player. But Trent is the one. Trent is the most spectacular English player we've seen since, prime Gerrard, maybe prime young Rooney, before the ankle injury in 2010. Just like Trent is phenomenal. He's the best or second best English player alive right now. It's either him or Kane. I would imagine Kane probably is number one, but it's like he's so good. People don't really understand how good he is. Let me give you just an example. In the Premier League this season, right? Bruno Fernandes has expected assists of wait for it, 5.83. Right, he's the second highest in the Premier League. That's really good. 5.83 expected assists this season, and he's having a bad season, but that's good. Trent is top. Trent has 10.86 expected assists this season. That's ridiculous. In the top 5 leagues, only one player has more. It's David Raum at Hoffenheim, and he's a left back or ring back. So Trent has almost double the expected assists of Bruno Fernandes, who's second best in the Premier League. And that means second best. That means Trent is more than double of Salah, more than double of De Bruyne, more than double of Cancelo, more than double of everyone. He's ridiculous, and his chances created, expected assists, every single number, and I'm sure we'll get into those in a minute. Every single number or stat you can conceive of, this guy smashes it. He's an unfathomably elite player. I can't believe there's even a question like that this guy should be starting for England. He should be the first or second name on the team sheet for England. He's utterly incalculably special, and it's baffling that people don't see that.
We're just going to look at some of them numbers, Josh. I'm going to throw it across to you because chances created is the thing that you automatically associate with a playmaker, whether it's this new breed of fullback playmaker or traditional kind of number 10 creative midfielder. So alongside chances created, if we look at passes into the final third based across that bracket of time, Trent is third in Europe, 1,997, averaging between 16 and 17 per 90 minutes. Cancelo gets a bit closer to him on this, 1,802, and he's third across the 90-minute spectrum, 20.5, and he beats him on the success rate, 81% to 65. But then when you go back out again to this real idea of impacting the attacking output of your team, and obviously Liverpool with Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's again top of the shop for penalty area entries, 1,503, and he's also top when you track that over 90 minutes, 12.3 per 90 minutes based across that bracket of seasons, and we're still talking about a right back with number 66 on his back.
Yeah, I mean, he is really, really special. I think he's different to anything I've seen before as a fullback, certainly. When it comes to Dani Alves, he was kind of, I'd say maybe his peak was maybe around 12 years ago. And the Dani Alves I kind of remember was, I think he was a bit more, not traditional, but I think he was inclined to impose his physical traits more than Trent. I think he was a bit more of a dribbler than Trent. I think Trent is a bit more in the mould of just a quarterback almost. I think he's redefining what the role means. He's occupying spaces that have always been, the safe spaces on the pitch from the perspective of an opposing team, and where you defend, you traditionally block the centre of the pitch. So those fullback areas have historically been the areas where you just kind of funnel possession towards, and once the possession gets there, you're safe. But Trent is redefining it, and you've mentioned there that he's creating chances, but he's also kind of ticking the progression box as well. He kind of does it all, really. The switches of play, the ability to get the ball from A to B into valuable areas, the ability to create chances for other players, set pieces. His execution from free kicks is right up there as well. So we can, and then on top of all that, you consider his age and the fact that he's playing for a club that he came through the academy. It's such a unique case, such a unique player, and I'm not sure if we're going to get to the point as to whether he's generational or not. But I think for me, a generational player,
he's definitely generational.
Yeah, well, I agree, mate. I agree. I think a generational player for me is someone who maybe makes you redefine what you thought was normal, and someone who redefines the expectations of a certain role. And I think Trent is having that effect. I think he's changing the perception of what it means to be a fullback and what you're supposed to deliver as a fullback as well.
Let me ask you a question, though, mate. Let me ask you because I do, like I said, they are all the children of Dani Alves, all these new playmaker fullbacks, because he was the first one to do it, and they all do it in different. I'm not saying they all do it in different ways, their own ways. Trent, right? Would you liken him? And this is what I've always thought: is he not like having Beckham at right back?
It's exactly like having Beckham at right back. Yeah,
like a 6 foot Beckham who's a bit. Obviously, Trent is not a great defender, but he's a physically strong defender. He can do it if he has to. But like the way he just gets the ball, and like you said, in positions where you're thinking, yeah, that's fine, he can have the ball there, and he just curves some ridiculous like geometric wonder like around like 3 defenders, and it's like, oh yeah, Mane heads it in, scores a goal, and it's like his ability to cross the ball with very little backlift and without needing to beat a man first to do it. It's just like I said, Beckham is the last guy I saw do that consistently from right wing, just absolutely, just like ping every time, different angles, different positions. It's not always the same cross, but his ability to do it is just unparalleled. And it's like this is why he's so dangerous, because like Josh says, he's standing in spaces where you're thinking he can have the ball there, he's not going to kill us there, but he can kill you from there. He can kill you from there. He's like a sniper, but he's not even the one taking a shot. He's like he's a sniper spotter. He's standing there going, okay, yeah, he's standing right there. Hey, you shoot him then, and then Mane comes in with the 50 cal. Or Salah comes in with a 50 cal and just bang, bang, bang. And everything's powderized brain matter. It's just ridiculous. You watch Liverpool, and when he doesn't play, they can play literally everyone else in their first team, but without Trent, and they're half as good as a team. And that's not to knock anyone else. Liverpool are a fantastic side. Everyone knows that I respect Liverpool immensely, but Trent is just... generated like no one. I mean, generational. Yeah, like people need to be talking about like, is he actually going to match Alves in terms of achievements? Because that's how good he is. He could do that if he keeps his level up. Obviously, it's very difficult. Dani Alves, his longevity has been part of the reason why he is the greatest right back of all time. Trent could rival that if he keeps this up. He's so ridiculously good. And you know what the biggest comparison between the two of them is? The biggest reason why I know Trent is a phenomenon is the criticisms of him. Oh, he can't defend. Every time he does anything good, yeah, but he can't defend. Who cares? Who cares? And first of all, he's not actually a bad defender anyway, but even if he was the worst defender in the universe, let's say, who cares? Look, again, double the expected assists of anyone else in the Premier League this season. Who cares if he can't defend? That's not what he's in the team to do. And this is why, and that's exactly what Dani Alves used to get all the time as well, is, he can't defend. It doesn't matter. When you give so much of the attack, that the team will bend itself to cover for you in defence, as we see with Jordan Henderson and doing so admirably there. That's why he's always in that Liverpool team as well, by the way. He does that.
Josh, this is where it comes back to with perceptions in terms of Trent, and both in a positive sense and in a negative sense, because we've talked about so much of the positives that are connected with him. But despite the fact that we are talking about someone that does, as you said, essentially redefine this role, whether he's a generational talent or not, he's still got a long career ahead of him to probably answer that question in full. But it is truly incredible that we're talking about somebody that has got the output of a midfielder, that's got the attacking intent of a forward, but a good 50% of the coverage and the conversation and on social media about Trent is this alleged lack of defensive ability. And it doesn't really matter how many numbers you throw around about him. Is he essentially doomed to be dogged by this for the rest of his career? Because the real football heads are always going to point about that time, I don't know, Ashley Barnes beat him in a header in 2018, and they'll never forget that. Is he doomed to have this for the rest of his career? Because despite the fact that the numbers do completely speak for themselves, people have already made their mind up on him due to a perception that's just not backed up by anything.
I don't think it's going away, and I think it stems from the traditional perspective of what English tactics are. And I think, it's kind of like having a go at De Bruyne for not defending enough, or having a go at Beckham back in his day for not defending enough or not defending to a certain level. Because Trent is essentially that player for Liverpool. It's just a case of the way the system works, and when Liverpool are in possession, Henderson's essentially the right back a lot of the time, and Trent becomes that midfield player who's playing as an 8, operating in the half spaces and things like that. So I think it's traditional, perspectives maybe that really bring Trent down in terms of viewing him as a fullback, and the old school line that a fullback is his first job is to defend and all that sort of stuff. It really depends, depending on the system and the confines that you're playing within. And he's got so much more responsibility than engaging in 1v1 battles. And what I will say as well, in terms of his defending, a lot of the time he's defending on the turn, or he's playing in the transition, things like that, defending in transition. It's really difficult for very, very rarely is he settled in like a block where he's able to benefit from coverage around him and from small spaces. A lot of the time, he's put in difficult positions where he's on the move and he's up against really tricky forwards who are already in behind him, and because of his responsibility to get up in the final third and stuff. So it's a difficult position for him to be in. But as I said, it's like it's as flawed in my opinion as having a go at De Bruyne for being defensively a bit weak, because it's the same kind of thing really for me.
It's reductive. Yeah, it's a reductive kind of perspective on it all. Josh, I just want to throw back to you before we move on to the next section. Mo has said that he thinks if Trent continues on this path, he is in a position to challenge Dani Alves. And we've maybe been a bit Trent heavy in terms of Cancelo. Some of the consistency output, Cancelo has edged him, but also perceptions. Cancelo doesn't have to deal with those comments that Trent does, despite the fact that he doesn't play in a kind of 1980s, 1990s fullback role. Do you think, again, that's perceptions, that the narrative has just been built around Trent, and it doesn't really matter what he does, what he achieves, what he wins? João Cancelo is basically doing the same, but in the blue of Manchester City instead of the red of Liverpool, and he's not getting the same level of attention.
Well, I also think that it's generally maybe easier to defend as a fullback for Manchester City, because I think City are a lot more inclined to form a block if you break their initial press. And I think because of their general style of play, the short passes and short tight spaces, you've always kind of got a player around the ball, a number of players around the ball, you've got support. And I think Cancelo is just, I think he's presented with easier situations to manage really than Trent. Liverpool's football is a lot more chaotic than Manchester City. A lot more. It's a lot more like basketball at times. I think Liverpool have moved away from that gradually, but it's still more in that mould than Manchester City's is. But I don't think it's in that Trent needs to particularly worry about, to be honest.
I think Cancelo he's play. It's the systems of play, right? It's the team system of play. Like Josh says, City. It's a lot more short passes, a lot more focus. So you look at what Cancelo does in the City team, and again, he's not the one producing the final balls that Trent is. Trent is Liverpool's main output in terms of creativity in their final passes, right? Cancelo is the link man in midfield. He makes everything tick and work because he plays in that midfield role. He can produce great through balls and whatnot. I'm not saying he can't, but he makes everything tick in midfield where that then like the likes of De Bruyne, Foden, Grealish, whoever can get forward and make those final passes because he's in midfield running the show essentially. So he's almost doing the work of. He's like City almost play like a double pivot, really, and they don't really. But Cancelo and Rodri having those two in there, and then you could almost make a point that City play like three in midfield and when the possession and the three in midfield is Rodri, Cancelo, and Walker. I mean, we'll get to Walker in a bit later, but it's like they play different roles, completely different roles. They are just both playmakers because that's what they do. But one final thing I want to put out before we move on from Trent, right? This is the greatest stat ever. Since the start of 2018-19, obviously, Trent has attempted 29 through balls with 17 completed, right? That's the highest among all fullbacks, right? But Dani Alves, who has played 6,432 fewer minutes than Trent Alexander-Arnold since the start of 2018-19, has attempted 26 through balls and completed 11. And he's 38. I just want to put that out there because that stat's so funny to me because it's like Alves is in the twilight of his career and has barely played and is still just so productive with the through balls. I'm not saying anything else. It's just that just is very funny to me, and I just think it just goes to show that as much as I do think Trent, if he keeps this up, can challenge Alves, it's a very, very high bar to reach. Dani Alves at right back. It's maybe won't even be clear to everyone until he actually does finally retire one day. People will realize just how good he was. And Trent is facing the same skepticism, which I think just goes to show how good Trent actually is. All people can do is doubt him. No one, he's so good. Everyone just says, oh, but he can't do this, he can't do that. Because all they can do is knock him down because there's no way to build him up any further because he's just that good.